Agatha Raisin and the Midnight Murder in James's Garden. Good evening, dear friends, and welcome back to the Detective Notebook. Tonight, we once again slip into the charming but never peaceful village of Carsely, tucked deep in the rolling Cotswolds. A place where the kettle is always warm, the gossip travels fast, and even a simple cream tea can spell disaster. Before we begin, feel free to tap the like button and subscribe, only if this kind of cozy chaos is your cup of tea. It truly helps the channel grow and keeps these mysteries coming your way. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? I love seeing how far our little mystery community reaches. Now, settle in, dim the lights, and grab a cup of tea, because tonight again we are going to step into Agatha's world.
Chapter 1. A Morning Before Trouble. Agatha Raisin stood in her garden, squinting at her reflection in the tall, slightly wobbly mirror she'd insisted on installing beside the rose arch. The morning sun shimmered faintly on its surface, revealing, much to her horror, a rebellious tuft of hair that had pushed itself skyward like an ambitious hedgerow. She poked at it, prodded it, coaxed it, and even muttered a small, irritated prayer. The breeze, soft but smug, lifted the tuft again. "Oh, do behave," she snapped, as if the wind were personally targeting her. Spring in Carsely had a nasty habit of being beautiful at the exact moments she felt most disheveled. The warm scent of blooming lilac drifted across Vicarage Lane. A few bees buzzed industriously over her lavender patch, and distant church bells chimed with such calm serenity that Agatha felt judged. Hodge trotted out from the kitchen door, tail high, radiating the confidence of a creature who had never once questioned his appearance. He brushed against her shin, and then, without warning, leapt onto the garden bench, knocking over the compact she had set there. It hit the stones with a clatter, popping open and spilling powder like a tiny explosion of beige. "Hodge, honestly, do you live to sabotage me?" Agatha huffed, scooping up the compact and tapping the cracked lid. "This was a very expensive shade, imported, practically couture." Two villagers strolled past her gate, a pair of talkative, nosy women whom Agatha privately referred to as the whispering wallflowers. Predictably, they slowed, peeked in, and murmured something behind their hands. "She's at it again," one said, not quite enough, though. "Every morning, mirror, mirror on the hedge?" the other giggled. Agatha's nostrils flared. She straightened her shoulders, pretending she hadn't heard, and adjusted her scarf with the elegance of a queen addressing lesser subjects. Just then, Mrs. Bloxby approached with her usual gentle smile, the kind that softened even Agatha's spiky mood. "Good morning, Agatha," she said. "Spring suits your garden wonderfully." "Well, something ought to," Agatha muttered, swatting at the breeze again. "My hair refuses to cooperate. Might as well declare independence from my head." Mrs. Bloxby chuckled softly. "You look lovely, dear, though I did notice a bit of, activity near James's garden this morning." Agatha stiffened. "Activity? What sort of activity? Not that I care, of course. James can do as he likes. I don't keep track of, anything." Her tone made it abundantly clear she kept track of absolutely everything. "Just a noise," Mrs. Bloxby said lightly, "a thud of some kind." Before Agatha could pry, Mrs. Carter, Carsley's reigning smug beauty, appeared on her morning walk. She paused at Agatha's gate, smirking at the garden mirror. "New decor, Agatha? Very theatrical, though I suppose some people need all the help they can get." Agatha's smile was so tight it could have cracked porcelain. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter. Lovely dress. A bit much for this hour, isn't it? But then not everyone can age gracefully." Mrs. Carter sniffed and strutted off. Agatha exhaled sharply, then bent to pick up her teacup from the bench. The warm sunlight glowed against the rim, and she took a long sip. Strong, peppery English breakfast. Comfort in a mug. But something caught her eye.
Muddy footprints along the stone path, small, uneven, leading towards James's hedge. Her heart ticked faster. Before she could inspect further, she heard it. 2 villagers passing by on the lane, whispering again. In James's garden. Looked like trouble. That was enough. A crow swooped down and landed on James's fence with an ill-timed caw, as if approving the drama. Agatha straightened, face set with resolve. I'm not investigating, she declared to the cats, the crow, the world. I'm simply checking, purely as a responsible neighbor. But her pulse fluttered with something suspiciously like excitement. Tonight at dusk, she would go. Agatha Raisin found herself pacing the gravel path outside James's cottage as the golden light of dusk softened the Cotswold hills. Damp earth released its rich, loamy scent into the air, mingling with the faint aroma of roasted meat from the Falcon pub across the lane. She claimed she was taking a casual evening stroll, though her fingers itched with the excitement of illicit curiosity. Just a walk, she muttered, smoothing down her cardigan for the 5th time, her reflection caught in the shiny brass gate knocker. Nothing suspicious, just stretching my legs. Health, yes, health first. She rehearsed plausible excuses for James in case he appeared mid-inspection. I was looking for a lost scarf, or I heard a fox. Even to herself the lies sounded pathetic, but it soothed her conscience slightly. Hodge trailed behind, swishing his tail, unimpressed with human pretenses. Boswell, ever the opportunist, had already claimed a patch of warm stone near the gate and purred like a tiny judgmental engine. The lane was quiet, save for distant pub chatter and the warm glow of cottage windows flickering in welcome. A neighbor, Mr. Finch, with his bowler hat tilted at a jaunty angle, ambled by and paused. "Evening, Miss Raisin," he said casually, as if dropping a bombshell were polite. "Heard James had a right row with someone last night, outside, near the shed." Agatha's curiosity sharpened. "Really?" She twisted her lips, attempting nonchalance. I didn't hear a thing, naturally. Didn't want to pry, of course. She edged closer to the gate, noticing a scrap of navy fabric snagged on a rose thorn. Her fingers tingled as she lifted it gingerly, the thorn prickling her palm. A slight pang of jealousy tickled her. If James had been arguing with a woman, naturally it would be someone elegant, presumably. Certainly not Agatha, whose hair had been rebelling all morning. She stepped back, pretending to admire the hedgerow, but her eyes tracked a shadow that slinked near the shed. It moved deliberately, but with a stealth that suggested neither casual gardening nor innocent curiosity. She blinked, heart tickling in that familiar way. "Probably a cat," she whispered to herself. Hodge looked unconvinced, tail flicking. Her gaze wandered across the cottage, the soft light spilling from the kitchen window, the faint silhouette of curtains swaying, the comforting hum of domestic life interrupted by a creeping tension that only Agatha could feel. She made a note in her head: investigate the shed, in daylight ideally, after a strong cup of tea. The torn fabric and furtive shadow already created enough suspense to make her pulse quicken. She bent down near the rosebush, brushing soil aside, when her eyes caught a subtle difference in the ground behind the shed. Fresh digging marks, uneven and deliberate. Something metallic glinted faintly beneath the soil, a hint of something buried or discarded. Agatha straightened, pretending to admire the hedge, heart hammering with excitement and irritation. "Oh, well," she muttered under her breath. "One casual stroll and already in the thick of drama. Perfectly ordinary evening, naturally." Hodge padded closer, sniffing at the disturbed earth, while Boswell meandered onto the path with dignified disdain, flicking his tail. The shadow by the shed had vanished, or perhaps melted into the growing twilight, but the mystery remained, tangible in her mind and pressing on her conscience. "Yes," she murmured, straightening her cardigan again, "I shall return tomorrow, purely to observe, and nothing more." But deep down she knew better. Something about those digging marks, the scrap of navy, and that fleeting shadow hinted that Carsley's gentle calm was about to be disrupted, and she would be right in the middle of it. Transition. Agatha decides to return tomorrow, and then everything changes. 150-word summary. As dusk settles, Agatha surveys James's garden with a mix of curiosity, vanity, and mild jealousy. A neighbor hints at a dispute James had the previous night, introducing the first human clue. Agatha discovers a scrap of navy fabric caught on a thorn and notices a shadowy figure near the shed, creating the first red herring. Cozy sensory details, damp earth, pub chatter, glowing windows, and cat's antics balance suspense with warmth. Fresh digging marks and a metallic glint behind the shed provide tangible evidence, hinting at buried secrets. Agatha's humorous self-talk, rehearsed excuses, and vanity scene maintain her charming personality while gently escalating tension. By the end, she resolves to return, fully engaged, setting the stage for the unfolding mystery.
Chapter 2. The Body in the Garden. The village of Carsely was asleep under a pale silver moon, its beams scattering across dew-laden lawns and cobblestones like fine dust. The night air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and frost, while an owl called somewhere in the distance, its cry a lonely punctuation to the stillness. Agatha Raisin, however, was far from peaceful. Hodge, apparently possessed by some nocturnal mania, leapt onto her dresser with the grace of a drunk acrobat and sent a porcelain vase clattering to the floor. The noise ricocheted in the quiet house, jolting Agatha upright. "Hodge," she hissed, half terrified, half scandalized, "do you have any concept of consequences?" Before she could pick him up, a piercing scream echoed from James's garden, slicing through the night like a scalpel. Her heart thumped so violently she thought it might leap from her chest and set the cats into a panic. "Oh, for heaven's sakes," she muttered, tugging at a dressing gown that had clearly lost all sense of dignity in the wash. "Someone is in distress, and I am apparently in charge. Brilliant." She shuffled down the creaking stairs, in slippers that squeaked with each step, a sound she hated almost as much as the scream itself. Slipping into the garden, Agatha's breath formed quick little clouds, and her fingers tingled from the chill. The moonlight glinted off the dew-soaked roses, casting long, ghostly shadows. There, amidst the flower beds, lay a figure, a man, sprawled unnaturally near the rose bushes. His coat was damp, leaves stuck to his collar, and his limbs bent in ways that screamed finality. Agatha froze. "Oh dear," she whispered, stepping closer. "Absolutely terrible." Her eyes betrayed both fascination and horror. She tiptoed, well, as much as slippers on gravel allow, toward the body, noting the faint, oddly sweet scent of men's cologne lingering in the cold air. Somehow, in the midst of this mortifying tableau, she couldn't stop herself from glancing at her ruined slippers. "Of course they'd be ruined," she muttered. "Everything ruined except my composure, mostly." She spun to look for James. Nothing. His cottage windows were dark, the back door locked. Panic fluttered behind her calm exterior. A rustling sound made her start. She spun. There was nothing, only the hedges trembling in the night breeze. Hodge rubbed against her leg, calm as if nothing had happened, and Boswell emerged from the shadow of the garden shed, yawning in utter disinterest. Her thoughts raced. The scream, the body, James absent, 1,000 questions collided with her usual vanity and self-consciousness. "I must look horrid. Oh, I'll be remembered for these slippers and this dressing gown," she muttered tongue-in-cheek. Suddenly, a car's headlights cut through the darkness. Bill Wong's familiar, worried face appeared at the gate, his expression somewhere between irritation and concern. "Agatha, what on earth are you doing outside at this hour?" he exclaimed. "You've gone pale. Are you—" "Dead man," she said flatly, pointing toward the roses, "and missing gentleman, apparently." Bill's eyes widened. He stepped closer, inspecting the scene. Soon the distant clatter of police boots echoed, and an officer crouched near the garden's perimeter, noting footprints leading towards James's back door. "James is missing," Bill muttered, finally glancing at her. Agatha felt her chest tighten, the thrill of the mystery colliding with real terror. Yet even now, she couldn't suppress the dry comment that bubbled up. "Missing, yes, but look at the slippers, Bill. Absolutely ruined." Bill groaned. Agatha took a deep breath. The night was still, the dew cold against her fingers, and the body lay quiet under the silver moonlight. She straightened, summoning her inner resolve. "I will solve this," she whispered, half to herself, half as a warning to the invisible culprit.
Carsley's calm was shattered, and Agatha Raisin, slippers aside, was about to immerse herself in the chaos.
The morning sun slanted through Agatha Raisin's kitchen windows, lighting up the cream-colored tiles and the tidy stacks of mugs. The kettle shrieked its impatient whistle, steam curling into the warm air like a miniature ghost. Agatha fumbled with the tea leaves, her hands unsteady despite her usual morning precision. Hodge inspected her progress with narrowed eyes, perched on a stool, while Boswell slouched on the windowsill, purring with the self-satisfied air of a feline landlord. Bill Wong sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, his gaze firm but not unkind. "Steady there," he said, watching Agatha pour water with exaggerated caution. "I need you coherent. We've got questions to answer." "Coherent, yes," Agatha murmured, handing him a mug that rattled slightly in her hand. "Though my slippers were ruined last night. Important context, naturally." The cottage smelled of strong tea, freshly baked bread from the corner bakery, and faint traces of lavender from Agatha's sprigs on the windowsill. The warmth was comforting, but the tension was palpable. Agatha's mind buzzed, replaying the events from dusk to midnight. The scream, the shadow, the body. Bill sipped his tea and leaned forward. "Tell me everything you saw last night," Agatha recounted, gesturing wildly. "I was merely taking a walk, a casual, entirely innocent stroll, of course. But then, Hodge will probably tell you, there was a body near the rose bushes, a dead man, and James nowhere to be found. Suspicious, don't you think?" Bill nodded, jotting notes. "Any idea who this man might have been?" "Not precisely," Agatha said, lowering her voice, "though I did notice a map of Carsely sticking out of his coat pocket, and James's house, obviously, was circled. Quite forward of him, really." "A map? That's useful," Bill said, raising an eyebrow. Agatha folded her arms, attempting dignity while secretly fretting. She couldn't help recalling the morning's gossip about Mrs. Carter, the village rival who always found subtle ways to make her feel inadequate. Jealousy prickled her like a persistent nettle. She couldn't imagine James being involved with anyone so preposterously polished, but the thought nagged at her. Bill continued, systematically probing. "Any reason anyone would have wanted to harm James or this man?" "Let me think," Agatha said aloud, pacing slightly. "There's Gordon, the rival gardener, obnoxious man with a penchant for boastful comments about the size of his prize dahlias. Then there's the newcomer, Mr. Harwood, mysterious, keeps to himself. And I mustn't forget Clarissa, James's ex, persistently dramatic and inclined to jealousy." She sipped her tea, grimacing at the mild bitterness. "Naturally, I suspect none of them, personally, but still, it's worth noting." Bill made notes quietly, giving her time to collect her thoughts. Agatha's mind raced with indignation and curiosity in equal measure. She refused to believe James could have been involved with a dead stranger, despite the evidence circling closer like a cautious fox. A knock at the door announced Mrs. Bloxby, ever the cheerful informant. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "I saw James arguing with a man near the hedge just last night, very heated, I must say." Agatha's heart thumped. Arguing, yes, but James guilty? Preposterous. Her chin lifted, eyes narrowing with stubborn determination. "I will get to the bottom of this, thank you very much, and no one else's assumptions will deter me." The kettle had cooled slightly, steam no longer rising, but the tension remained. Agatha sipped her tea, comforted by its warmth and the cosy familiarity of her kitchen, yet her mind was already racing through streets, hedges, and flower beds. Suspects existed, clues were scattered, and she would follow each one.
Chapter 3. Suspects and Secrets. The village greenhouse was a steamy haven of peat, pollen, and trapped bees buzzing lazily against glass panes fogged with heat. Agatha Raisin perched herself on a wrought-iron chair, back ramrod straight, gripping a porcelain teacup like a royal scepter. She prided herself on her perfect teacup posture, even as a biscuit, inevitably, slipped from her fingers and plopped into her lap. "Oh, splendid," she muttered. "At least the mud hasn't spread." Across from her, Mr. Pritchard, the village gardener, knelt beside a workbench, polishing spades with methodical care. Agatha squinted at the blades, critiquing them as if she had ever gardened beyond the occasional potted herb. "You call this pruning even?" she asked, though her eyes couldn't help glancing downward at the mud streaking his boots. He didn't notice. He never did. The scent of damp soil and earthworms mingled with the faint sweetness of lemon cake Bill had thoughtfully brought. Steam rose from her tea like morning mist over the Cotswolds, warming her hands and temporarily calming the tight knot of curiosity and suspicion she carried. Outside, Bill Wong questioned Mr. Pritchard, his tone calm but probing. "Where were you last night, around dusk?" "Same as always," Pritchard said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Tending the allotments. Roses are temperamental, you know. One day they're polite, the next they're plotting murder." His deadpan delivery elicited a small, reluctant smile from Agatha. She made a mental note. Gardener with a sense of humor. Possible alibi. Sally, a local woman who always seemed to twinkle with mischief, leaned against the greenhouse doorframe. "I could swear I saw you near James's gate just before dusk, Mr. Pritchard," she teased, giving Agatha a playful smirk. Jealousy pricked at her ribs. She had always had a complicated relationship with James's proximity. "Really, Agatha," Sally whispered, "you mustn't fret. He's so polite." Agatha's thoughts drifted absurdly. Maybe I should try using pruners as hair accessories. No, too sharp, too dramatic. Hodge would disapprove. Bill nodded at Pritchard's helper, who offered a shaky confirmation of the gardener's nighttime movements, but Agatha noticed evasive glances and subtle hesitations, fueling her suspicion. When she examined Pritchard's coat later, the soil on its hem differed subtly from the damp earth of James's garden. Mismatch. Notable. Intriguing. "Roses do tend to hold secrets," Agatha muttered, more to herself than anyone else, sipping tea and noting the oppressive warmth of the greenhouse, the faint scent of manure and the soft hum of bees in glass frames. The domestic calm contrasted sharply with the tension coiling like a snake in her chest. Then, caught on a low rosebush near the greenhouse path, Agatha spotted it. A leather glove, partially torn with a curious thread snagging the thorns. Her pulse quickened. She held it aloft. Pritchard's eyes widened, his face paling imperceptibly. "Old," he said quickly. "Been there for weeks. I mean months." Agatha's sharp gaze lingered on a dark smudge along the cuff. "Old, you say? Curious. That smear could be anything." Before she could press further, Pritchard's composure broke. "I must check the greenhouse lock. Can't leave it unattended." He backed away, glancing nervously at the glove. Then he was gone, muttering about padlocks and temperature control. Agatha sat for a moment, steaming teacup in hand, biscuit crumbs dotting her lap, and considered the puzzle. Soil mismatch, evasive helper, the glove with a suspicious smear, Pritchard's abrupt departure, all pieces of a tapestry still incomplete. Agatha Raisin adjusted her lipstick for the third time as she approached the small, modern cottage perched at the edge of Carsely, its minimalist garden a stark contrast to the riotous blooms of the village center. The air smelled faintly of expensive soap and foreign spices, scent markers of an outsider who clearly didn't belong. She smoothed her cardigan and tucked her hair neatly behind her ears, rehearsing a polite yet incisive expression. "Oh, behave," she muttered under her breath, striding to the front door. Even in her vanity, she couldn't ignore the thrill of stepping into unknown territory. Hodge trailed obediently, whiskers twitching, while Boswell, predictably, had claimed her shoulder as a perch during the journey, making the walk slightly more precarious. The door opened to reveal the newcomer, Mr. Ellis, a tall, reserved man with neatly combed hair and an air of polite reserve. The polished wood floor gleamed underfoot, and a faint scent of unfamiliar perfume, or perhaps aftershave, mingled with the distant hum of the motorway beyond. Agatha stepped inside, lips still slightly overdrawn, imagining herself as modern and sophisticated, a notion she promptly discarded when Boswell leapt off her shoulder and bolted toward a low sideboard. "Ah, excuse me," she said, retrieving the cat, cheeks warming. Mr. Ellis offered a courteous smile, gesturing to a small seating area. Agatha accepted, perching like a delicate figurine on the arm of a sofa while tea was awkwardly poured into delicate cups. She nearly tipped the teapot over while reaching for the sugar, muttering, "Clearly I am a disaster in modern interiors." Casual questioning ensued. Agatha's eyes, sharp as ever, noted a tiny brass key perched conspicuously on the mantelpiece. "And this?" she asked, voice deceptively light. Mr. Ellis's smile faltered. "Ah, an old trunk," he said vaguely. "Family heirloom. Nothing of interest to anyone here." "Of course," Agatha said, though her mind ticked with possibilities. The conversation turned. Mr. Ellis admitted to a minor argument with the victim the previous week over a disputed parcel, an old boundary matter James had mentioned in passing. He exhibited small scratches on his hands, consistent with gardening or shrubbery work. Agatha's gaze flicked to a matching button pinned inside her tea-napkin case, an identical button to one she had noticed near James' rosebush, though the stitching was slightly different. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or evidence planted. Bill, standing politely by the doorway, caught the newcomer's casual, polite glance, and Agatha bristled. The faint warmth of jealousy arose as Mr. Ellis offered Bill a small conspiratorial smile. She cleared her throat and shifted in her seat, imagining herself as the modern heroine of a detective novel, while simultaneously failing spectacularly. Suddenly, the cat, Boswell, leapt from the arm of the sofa onto Mr. Ellis's lap, causing him to flinch and spill a drop of tea. Agatha suppressed a laugh, noting both the comic absurdity and the awkward tension it created. Returning her attention to the brass key, she asked pointedly, "Do you know why James might have possessed such a key?" Mr. Ellis stiffened noticeably. I'm not entirely sure. It belongs to an old trunk my family had, but James, he might have found it, yes, and old curiosity." His eyes flicked toward the key as if trying to memorize its placement. Agatha smiled thinly. Curiosity sparked. This small, ordinary object might be far more significant than its owner realized. The combination of a mysterious key, matching but subtly different button, and Mr. Ellis's evasive explanation was enough to set her mind racing. As she left the modern cottage, she considered the contrast between the polished, unfamiliar interior and the warm chaos of Carsely, realizing that outsiders carried secrets, sometimes hidden in plain sight. The brass key and its possible connection to James' attic or a locked trunk had become the next focus of her investigation, promising both intrigue and adventure in the days to come.
Chapter 4. Red herrings bloom. The warm glow of lamplight filled Mrs. Blocksby's parlor, casting soft shadows over floral wallpaper and delicate lace curtains. The scent of fresh scones mingled with clotted cream and Earl Grey, and the gentle ticking of the mantel-clock provided a steady, reassuring rhythm. Agatha Raisin arrived slightly late, apologizing in a stage whisper to the assembled book club members. "Running late again," she muttered under her breath, tugging at her cardigan and smoothing her hair with unnecessary precision. "At least no one can say I wasn't punctual in spirit." The members were already immersed in discussion, debating the merits of the romantic novel for the month. Between delicate sips of tea, whispered asides and pointed glances betrayed a layer of gossip far more captivating than any fictional scandal. Naturally, James's name crept into the conversation like an uninvited but fascinating guest. One member, Mrs. Cranford, leaned forward. "James has always been so secretive, hasn't he?" she said, eyes narrowing, "never volunteering information unless he chose to." Another, Miss Thistle, wagged her finger. "Generous, though. He quietly donates to the fete, helps where needed. Such a shame some people only see what they want to see."
Voices rose, heatedly debating a misplaced donation James had arranged for the village fete. Petty jealousy surfaced. One woman accused another of hogging the scones, another of gossiping too freely. Agatha stifled a laugh, nearly spilling her tea, imagining herself as a courtroom judge, adjudicating disputes over clotted cream and stale gossip. Bending down to retrieve a dropped sugar spoon, her eyes caught a library book under a chair. She lifted it carefully, noting James's bookmark peeking from the pages. On it, a cryptic name was scrawled in neat, familiar handwriting. Curiosity prickled, mingling with the comfort of warm tea and buttery scones. She opened the last page and frowned. A faint perfume stain clung to the paper, incongruous and oddly floral. Interesting, she thought, noting that it didn't match the victim's scent or any other aroma she remembered. Her mind flitted to a humorous, absurd notion. If books could commit murder, this one would be the prime suspect. She snorted softly, earning a curious glance from a fellow member. "Perhaps next month," suggested Miss Thistle with a mischievous grin, "we read a proper murder mystery, just in case anyone's inspired by current events." A ripple of polite laughter ensued. Agatha smiled tightly, internally noting how crime and propriety danced together in Carsely. Then a hushed voice pierced the chatter. "James has been secretly meeting someone at the old chapel," a club member blurted. Gasps followed. Agatha's eyes widened. The newcomer had denied ever visiting that location, yet here was a tangible lead contradicting her story. She glanced down at the bookmark again. The cryptic name inscribed on it matched what the member had just whispered. Silence fell across the room. Even Mrs. Bloxby's habitual humming ceased. Agatha's mind raced. The book, the bookmark, the chapel meetings, threads intertwining with James's secret life. Hodge, who had been resting discreetly on a corner chair, twitched his ears and padded softly towards her lap, seeking attention. Boswell, predictably, took offense at the intrusion and leapt onto the mantel, scattering delicate ornaments and causing a soft clatter. Agatha suppressed a laugh, noting the small domestic absurdities that eased the tension just enough to keep the afternoon cozy despite the revelation. Her teacup now half empty, her mind spinning, Agatha resolved to follow this lead. The old chapel awaited, along with James's correspondence that might reveal more about clandestine meetings and unspoken rivalries.
The Falcon pub glowed warmly against the creeping dusk, its oak beams darkened by years of peat smoke and the gentle haze of fires burning low in the hearth. Agatha Raisin pushed open the heavy door, immediately greeted by the mingling scents of ale, roasting meat, and polished wood. The landlord, a stout man with a cheerful grin, polished glasses behind the bar, the clink echoing through the room. "Ah, Mrs. Raisin, Mr. Wong," he called, waving them over. Agatha gave a tight smile, secretly glad for the cozy familiarity amid the tension of recent events. "Tea, please," she said, with an air of dignified offense as a barmaid winked. "Tea? In a pub? Honestly." The warmth of the hearth seeped through her cardigan as she settled onto a high stool, the crackle of logs and occasional shouts from the football match on the small wall-mounted television creating a soothing background. Bill winked at her. "Comfortable?" he asked. "Barely," Agatha muttered, mock glaring at a plate of pie someone had left half-eaten. "The audacity of pub cuisine. Just look at it." Once tea was poured, conversation turned to more pressing matters. The landlord leaned in, lowering his voice. "Strange thing. I saw someone washing off, well, blood in the alley behind the tavern last night. Unusual hour, unusual visitor." Agatha's ears perked. "Boots? Clothing? Anyone recognizable?" "Boots," he replied, voice hushed. "Unique soles, horseshoe pattern. Couldn't miss him if I tried." Mr. Finch, the elderly regular seated near the fireplace, croaked, "Saw the same boots by the garden center last week. Odd coincidence." Agatha's mind raced.
Muddy boots, distinctive soles, late-night washing, threads weaving together. The barmaid, overhearing, leaned toward Agatha. "Murder on tap, anyone?" she joked, causing a small ripple of laughter. Agatha smirked, imagining a pint of ale with a clue in every frothy head. Later, the patrons joined in a sing-along of an old village song, its jolly melody offsetting the sinister undertones of her investigation. She thought, not for the first time, that only in Carsely could murder and merriment coexist so comfortably. While sipping tea, Agatha's sharp eye caught a crumpled beer mat tucked into James's coat pocket, matching the cryptic name found on the library bookmark. Another tangible link appeared, tying the pub, the victim, and the mysterious meetings together. She examined the beer mat with mock gravity. "Notice how the mysteries of life often involve sticky surfaces and spilled ale," she murmured to Bill, who rolled his eyes but hid a smile. The cozy warmth of the pub contrasted with the dark implications. A patron at the end of the bar cleared his throat. "I lent my boots to someone last night," he admitted, voice wavering. "Can't quite remember who. Could be anyone. Gardener, newcomer, or another." Agatha frowned, digesting the information. The ambiguity only fueled her determination. Between the alley washing, the distinctive horseshoe soles, and the beer mat matching the bookmark, several threads now converged, yet none provided a clear answer. The multiple possibilities teased her, curiosity alight. With the last sip of her tea, she straightened in her chair, Hodge and Boswell nudging for attention. She collected her coat and handbag, the familiar warmth of the pub fading as she prepared to retrace the alley, investigate the boot lending, and pursue the next lead on the mysterious footprints. Cozy, humorous, and bustling with village life, the Falcon had provided both comfort and a crucial step forward in her unraveling investigation. Chapter 5. The String Tightens. The morning air smelled sharply of damp earth, spades, and the faint sweetness of roses heavy with dew. Agatha Raisin pulled on her gloves, flashlight in hand, and stepped carefully through the narrow path of James's garden. The petals glistened, sparkling with moisture, as if each bloom had captured a fragment of sunlight overnight. She crouched near the rose beds, inhaling the warm, loamy scent and marveling, briefly, at how carefully James had tended his plantings. Even now, in the midst of mystery and unease, she felt a genuine affection for his work. Birdsong punctuated the quiet, and Hodge padded along, his whiskers twitching as he explored the flower beds, occasionally batting at a wayward leaf. She approached the shed, its old wooden panels weathered and smelling faintly of oil and varnish. The door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a clutter of tools and crates. Among them, a leather-bound ledger caught her eye. Opening it carefully, she noted several recent withdrawals of money, payments made to an unknown party. A torn letter tucked between pages hinted at blackmail. Part of a sentence read, "You'll regret crossing me if you don't comply." Agatha's brow furrowed. Even behind the domestic charm of roses and birds, James had secrets, ones that could have cost him dearly. Her fingers brushed a small hidden box beneath the shelf. Inside were photographs. James shaking hands with serious-looking men, documents suggesting an old business dispute. Agatha's mind raced, connecting the dots. She felt a pang of sympathy for James. Whatever he had been involved in, he didn't deserve to die. She muttered softly, "Gardening is the new scandal, evidently." Hodge, seizing the moment, scooped a stray glove from her pile and dashed into the shadows, eliciting an exasperated laugh. Suddenly, a familiar voice called from the gate. A female rival, slightly flustered, appeared, asking pointedly about James's whereabouts. She brushed against Agatha's arm defensively, jealousy and territoriality intertwined in the touch. Agatha stiffened but forced a polite smile. "He's indisposed," she said, allowing the subtle rivalry to simmer beneath the surface. Back in the shed, Agatha's eyes caught the edge of a panel in the corner. Curious, she pried it open with the flat of her flashlight. Inside lay a hidden compartment. Her pulse quickened as she carefully opened it. There, perfectly preserved, was a brass key, twin to the one she had seen in Mr. Ellis's mantelpiece, and beneath it a folded map marked with a location, the old chapel. Dated the same week as the murder, it suggested James had been planning something significant, secretive, and possibly dangerous. Agatha leaned back, exhaling slowly, absorbing the gravity of her discovery. The garden around her, still fragrant and alive, felt a momentary comfort amid the weight of intrigue. Hodge returned, dropping her missing glove at her feet as if to punctuate the moment with domestic normalcy. Even in the midst of secrets, the rhythm of daily life, cat mischief, the scent of roses, the soft morning light, offered a grounding, cozy balm. This collection of artifacts, ledger payments, blackmail letter, photographs, the brass key, and the chapel map, shifted the investigation forward decisively. James's secret entanglements had provided motive, and the marked location gave Agatha a concrete next step. Balancing her empathy for James with the growing complexity of suspects, she tucked the map into her bag, ready to bring it to Bill. Together they would follow the trail to the old chapel, pursuing leads with the cautious curiosity only a village detective like Agatha could muster.
Agatha Raisin trudged along the damp November lane toward her cottage, her thoughts tangled between James's secrets and the map pointing to the old chapel. The crisp air carried the faint scent of wet leaves and chimney smoke, comforting, yet biting enough to make her shiver. Hodge padded along at her heels, tail flicking with agitation, and suddenly began pawing insistently at a small parcel that had been left near the gate. Curious, and mildly alarmed, Agatha picked it up. The parcel was wrapped in coarse brown paper, slightly damp from overnight dew. As she tore it open, the smell of old paper mixed with the chill of the morning. Inside lay a torn fragment of a photograph and a note, scrawled in uneven handwriting. "Stop nosing." Agatha froze, heart tickling with alarm. Someone was clearly aware of her investigation, or at least wanted to intimidate her. She glanced over her shoulder. The lane was empty, but the rustle of fallen leaves made her jump. "Fashionably late villains," she muttered, shaking her head at her own dramatic thoughts. Footsteps crunched nearby. Agatha ducked instinctively into a thick hedgerow, crouching low among the frost-kissed leaves. A shadow passed by, muttering under its breath. She held her breath, imagining all sorts of sinister outcomes. Hodge, however, had other ideas. The cat darted ahead, leaping onto a drain pipe and clawing with fervor. A small object fell into the leaves. A cigarette butt. Agatha picked it up carefully. The brand, familiar from the garden, matched the one the victim had smoked. Her pulse quickened. This tiny clue could tie someone directly to James's garden that night. The hedgerow provided some cover, yet Agatha's nerves tingled. Every crunch of leaves sounded exaggerated in the quiet lane. Two cozy moments of levity intervened. First, a rustle made her spin around, convinced it was the mysterious shadow, but it was Mrs. Bloxby collecting her laundry. "Oh, it's just you," Agatha muttered, flushing. Second, she grumbled under her breath at the apparent punctuality of criminals, noting how one might hope for better fashion sense in a villain. With the cigarette butt safely pocketed, Agatha retreated to her cottage, the chill of early morning biting through her cardigan. She set Hodge down and examined the torn photograph fragment, an evidence, but frustratingly incomplete. Who had left it, and why now? By dawn, Bill arrived, and Agatha presented the cigarette butt, her fingers curling tightly around the small clue. "Lab analysis might tell us more," she said, voice brisk with anticipation. His eyes widened slightly at the potential for DNA evidence, a first truly tangible link to a suspect. But before they could discuss it further, a neighbor's shout reached them. James's shed had been tampered with overnight. Footprints led away from the scene, toward the chapel. The realization struck Agatha hard. Someone was actively cleaning up traces or sending messages just as she was beginning to piece the puzzle together. Hodge purred insistently at her side, as if reminding her that despite shadows and threats, the domestic world remained intact. A warm hearth, a curious cat, and the persistent aroma of tea. Yet the sense of urgency now outweighed cozy comforts. The investigation had accelerated, and the chapel awaited. Agatha tucked the torn photo and cigarette butt into her coat pocket, brushing dew off her gloves, determined to follow the trail.
The case had shifted from idle curiosity to imminent danger. Someone was watching, someone was acting, and the chapel held the next clue.
Chapter 6. Mrs. Blocksby drops a bombshell. Agatha Raisin followed Mrs. Blocksby up the narrow steps of her tidy cottage, feeling a mixture of anticipation and the faint thrill of being granted confidential access. The parlor was neatly arranged, every floral cushion plumped to perfection, a faint lemon scent drifting from the freshly poured teacups. "A serious cuppa," Mrs. Blocksby said, placing the tray on the low table, her tone unusually solemn. Agatha, flattered by the invitation, yet determined to appear composed, perched delicately on the edge of a chair, smoothing the folds of her cardigan and attempting an expression of serious intent. The kettle had barely cooled when Mrs. Blocksby leaned forward. "It's time someone told you the truth about James," she said, her voice tight with unease. Agatha sipped her tea slowly, the warmth calming her jittering thoughts, while she nodded encouragingly, eyes sharp and alert. Mrs. Blocksby's confession spilled out like a controlled torrent. She had been blackmailed by James over a charitable fund intended for the village fete, threatened with exposure of past indiscretions if she didn't comply with his demands. He had summoned her to secret meetings repeatedly, wielding his knowledge as leverage. She produced a small, worn ledger, revealing recent withdrawals and cash transfers. Agatha examined it closely. Several payments were clearly marked, but a few unmarked sums were directed to another figure, a respected member of the village whom no one would suspect. Agatha's mind raced. Sympathy for James collided with irritation at his duplicity. "Men and their secrets," Mrs. Blocksby muttered, waving a finger in the air. "Always a surprise tucked in their tweed jackets." Agatha nearly snorted tea through her nose at the image. "Perhaps a detective agency is in my future," she mused silently, eyeing the ledger as if it could reveal not only motives but career opportunities. The conversation deepened, Mrs. Blocksby recounting specific threats and moments of intimidation. Agatha felt a pang of moral ambivalence. James, the victim she had felt for so keenly, had also wielded power in the shadows, entangling others in a web of fear and obligation. The humanizing yet morally complex portrait of the deceased left her mind spinning. Who was ally? Who was suspect? And who had simply been caught in James's manipulative games? Mrs. Blocksby paused, glancing nervously at the window. I overheard something the night before the murder," she admitted in a whisper. Her eyes flicked toward Agatha, small and earnest. Someone we never would have suspected, threatened him. I shouldn't have heard it, but I did." The weight of her words settled between them. Agatha's pulse quickened. The person above suspicion now loomed in her mind, reframing everything. Agatha's teacup trembled slightly in her hands, and she had to stifle a laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Moral reversals, hidden ledgers, clandestine threats, and yet the warm floral cushions and lemony tea remained comforting. She straightened, determination setting into her spine. This new lead demanded confrontation, and the previously respected figure would soon meet Agatha's probing questions. The room hummed with quiet tension, punctuated by Mrs. Blocksby's occasional blunt quip and Agatha's flustered, self-deprecating retorts. The emotional weight of the revelation, combined with the cozy domestic scene, created a perfect blend of suspense and comfort, drawing Agatha and the listener deeper into the unfolding mystery.
Agatha Raisin sat at her kitchen table, sunlight filtering through lace curtains and illuminating a careful chaos of evidence. The map to the old chapel lay unfurled beside James's worn ledger, the leather glove, the cigarette butt, and the torn photograph fragment. A half-eaten biscuit, left forgotten from breakfast, crumbled near her elbow. She muttered aloud to herself, "If I'm not careful, I'll start believing my own deductions without consulting anyone else," and smirked at the self-hypnosis humor, tapping the glove with her pointer finger. Hodge, perched on the windowsill, watched her with feline judgment. tail swishing. Bill Wong leaned over the table, hands behind his back, peering at the assorted clues. Together, they began to weave a coherent narrative. The ledger revealed clandestine payments James had made in the weeks before his death, the unmarked sums directed towards someone whose identity had previously been hidden behind respectability. The chapel, James's clandestine meeting point, aligned with the discussion over the brass key and a small trunk he insisted be returned. The victim, it seemed, had confronted James about the hidden trunk and threatened exposure. Agatha held up the cigarette butt. Its distinctive brand, one known for heavy chain smokers, narrowed down potential suspects in Carsely. She then examined the glove more closely. The thread's dye was unique, used only by a single local tailor. Cross-referencing names, dates, and locations led inexorably to the previously respected figure Mrs. Bloxby had hinted at. Agatha's mind whirred. The connections were becoming painfully clear. James had leveraged money, secrets, and threats. The victim had been part of a small conspiracy or perhaps a warning, and the previously respected figure had motives both economic and personal. Jealousy flared briefly as the respected figure, in recent conversation with Will, had complimented him in a manner that Agatha found unnecessarily flattering. She shot Bill a sidelong glare. "Not that your charm needs endorsement, but apparently it does," she muttered under her breath. Bill only offered a dry quip. "I'll add it to my list of accomplishments, right after surviving your tea critique." Agatha snorted, nearly knocking over her coffee, and Hodge seized the moment to bat a pencil across the table. By mid-morning, Agatha had organized a timeline, linking the ledger, the glove, the cigarette, the chapel, and the torn photograph. It formed a compelling chain of events. James, trying to cover past misdeeds and manipulate village funds, had entangled the victim in a confrontation at the chapel. The previously respected figure had both opportunity and motive, and all evidence now pointed clearly to their involvement. But as she prepared to relay the final conclusions to Bill and consider their approach, a small envelope slid silently beneath her door. Agatha froze, exchanging a look with Bill. The message inside read, "Stop or you will be next." Her pulse quickened, the casual comfort of her kitchen momentarily replaced by a shiver of warning. The stakes had suddenly escalated, but the detective in her bristled with resolve rather than fear. The clues, neatly arrayed across the kitchen table, offered clarity and urgency. Agatha tucked the envelope into her coat pocket, already plotting the confrontation at the upcoming village hall meeting. The moment for reasoning, deduction, and persuasion was approaching, but she now knew, beyond doubt, that the suspect was aware she was closing in. With a final glance at the scattered evidence, Agatha muttered to herself, "Time to put theory into practice, and pray my slippers survive the drama." Hodge leapt onto the table, pawing at the map, as if approving her resolve.
Chapter 7. The Village Hall's Showdown. The village hall smelled of polished wood, dust, and a faint tang of boiled sandwiches, with bunting strung haphazardly across the ceiling and chairs set in neat rows. Agatha Raisin arrived, chest puffed like a proud general and mind buzzing with nerves. She carried a small stack of notes and a magnifying glass for dramatic flair, which she brandished casually, eliciting an amused glance from Bill. The faint hum of villagers settling into their seats, the clink of a tea-urn being adjusted, and Hodge's occasional yowl from Bill's coat pocket added a cozy domestic soundtrack to the tense atmosphere. Clearing her throat, Agatha began. "Ladies, gentlemen, and anyone who enjoys a scandal with their scones, we are here to discuss James's unfortunate demise." She laid out the evidence, the map leading to the chapel, the ledger with unmarked cash, the leather glove with peculiar thread, the cigarette butt, and the torn photograph fragment. Villagers murmured, some leaned forward, whispering guesses to neighbours. The previously respected figure shifted uneasily in their seat, stammering and deflecting, clearly unaccustomed to public scrutiny. The air thickened with tension as Mrs. Bloxby's rival, Sally, suddenly rose, eyes flashing.
"And let's not forget the personal grievances James caused," she exclaimed, pointing fingers with dramatic precision. Agatha allowed herself a small, self-satisfied smile as villagers gasped, scandal mingling with curiosity. 2 light comic moments eased the tension. Agatha, attempting a dramatic flourish with her magnifying glass, accidentally knocked a few biscuits onto the floor. Hodge seized one mid-air with a triumphant paw, eliciting quiet laughter. Then a minor scuffle occurred when a chair scraped and a teacup wobbled precariously, forcing Agatha to wave her hands in mock despair. Suddenly, the greenhouse helper arrived, slightly out of breath, clutching a notebook. "I think you need this," he said, producing a timeline confirming when the gardener had left the allotments, key information that filled the missing gap in the evening of the murder. Gasps rippled through the hall. The previously respected figure's eyes widened, their confidence faltering as villagers began connecting dots. As Agatha pressed, guiding the audience through her deductions, the suspect's panic grew. "I think the police should handle this," they said, voice trembling. The room quieted, all attention on the unfolding drama. Agatha's mind raced, weighing how to maintain control while the suspect teetered on the edge of confession. Then a shocking interruption. A figure in the back rose abruptly. "I saw James alive after the supposed time of death." The hall froze, murmurs swelled. Before anyone could ask further, the witness swayed and collapsed dramatically onto the floor. Gasps and cries erupted. Chairs tipped, teacups rattled. Hodge leapt from Bill's coat to the floor, yowling in alarm. Agatha rushed forward, heart pounding. The collapse, whether fainting or staged, had thrown the entire confrontation into chaos. Villagers clustered around, speculation buzzing in every corner. The previously respected figure paled, as though their carefully constructed defenses were crumbling, but the sudden collapse prevented immediate confession. Agatha's mind raced. A diversion, a warning, or a genuine medical incident. Regardless, the moment had passed, leaving suspense thick in the hall, curiosity piqued, and the confrontation unresolved. Agatha straightened, adjusting her cardigan, and whispered to Bill, "Well, that escalated faster than my teacup tipping hazard." Bill smirked, helping her regain composure. The village hall was in uproar, the crowd divided, and Agatha knew the next step would have to be private, precise, and unassailable. The mystery had reached a fever pitch, but the final confession remained tantalizingly out of reach. Transition. Chaos in the hall delays confession. Agatha and Bill plan a private follow-up to confront the suspect directly. 150-word summary. Agatha's public presentation at the village hall forces villagers to react to evidence: the map, ledger, glove, cigarette butt, and photograph fragment. The previously respected figure falters under scrutiny, while Sally, a rival, exposes personal grievances, amplifying tension. Comic relief punctuates the drama. A magnifying glass flourish scatters biscuits. Hodge seizes one mid-air with a triumphant paw, eliciting quiet laughter. Then a minor scuffle occurred when a chair scraped and a teacup wobbled precariously, forcing Agatha to wave her hands in mock despair. Suddenly, the greenhouse helper arrived, slightly out of breath, clutching a notebook. "I think you need this," he said, producing a timeline confirming when the gardener had left the allotments, key information that filled the missing gap in the evening of the murder. Gasps rippled through the hall. The previously respected figure's eyes widened, their confidence faltering as villagers began connecting dots. As Agatha pressed, guiding the audience through her deductions, the suspect's panic grew. "I think the police should handle this," they said, voice trembling. The room quieted, all attention on the unfolding drama. Agatha's mind raced, weighing how to maintain control while the suspect teetered on the edge of confession. Then a shocking interruption. A figure in the back rose abruptly. "I saw James alive after the supposed time of death." The hall froze, murmurs swelled. Before anyone could ask further, the witness swayed and collapsed dramatically onto the floor. Gasps and cries erupted, chairs tipped, teacups rattled. Hodge leapt from Bill's coat to the floor, yowling in alarm. Agatha rushed forward, heart pounding. The collapse, whether fainting or staged, had thrown the entire confrontation into chaos. Villagers clustered around, speculation buzzing in every corner. The previously respected figure paled, as though their carefully constructed defences were crumbling, but the sudden collapse prevented immediate confession. Agatha's mind raced. A diversion, a warning, or a genuine medical incident. Regardless, the moment had passed, leaving suspense thick in the hall, curiosity piqued, and the confrontation unresolved. Agatha straightened, adjusting her cardigan, and whispered to Bill, "Well, that escalated faster than my teacup tipping hazard." Bill smirked, helping her regain composure. The village hall was in uproar, the crowd divided, and Agatha knew the next step would have to be private, precise, and unassailable. The mystery had reached a fever pitch, but the final confession remained tantalizingly out of reach.
After the chaos of the village hall, Agatha Raisin arranged a private meeting in the small, dimly lit back room of the hall. A police officer sat quietly in the corner, clipboard in hand, while Agatha faced the previously respected suspect. Rain pattered rhythmically against the leaded windows, soaking the coats of villagers who had followed but stayed outside. The scent of damp wool and the faint tang of brewed tea lingered in the room, mingling with the steady ticking of an old wall clock. Agatha perched on the edge of a chair, shoulders squared, eyes sharp but calm. "I'd like us to go over a few things," she began, spreading the evidence neatly on the table. The leather glove with its peculiar smear, the cigarette butt, the ledger detailing clandestine payments, and the torn photograph fragment. Each item seemed to hum with quiet significance. The suspect swallowed hard, hands clenching and unclenching, glancing at the police officer, then at Agatha. Methodical questioning followed. Agatha calmly connected the dots. The glove matched the thread only produced by the local tailor. The cigarette DNA confirmed presence at the crime scene, and the ledger established motive. Each revelation was paired with a question, forcing the suspect to confront inconsistencies in their story. The initially composed demeanor began to crack. Finally, under the weight of undeniable forensic and circumstantial evidence, the suspect's composure broke. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt," they stammered, voice trembling. The confession spilled out. Revenge for a ruined reputation, a desperate attempt to cover past misdeeds tied to James, and a plan meant to intimidate rather than kill outright. The method had been carefully staged to look accidental, but fear and panic had escalated the situation beyond intention. Villagers' earlier shock replayed in Agatha's mind, though the immediate company was smaller, more intimate. A subtle touch of humor eased the tension. The suspect attempted a melodramatic denial, flailing slightly, causing Agatha to mutter under her breath, "Good grief, if this were a play, you'd get top billing for the most theatrical feint." The suspect's crimson cheeks deepened, and even Bill suppressed a grin. Hodge, perched on a windowsill, twitched his tail in judgment, as though unimpressed by human theatrics. Emotional beats surfaced. The suspect expressed genuine regret for the fear and disruption caused, while Agatha noted the village's shock and relief. Connections between evidence and motive were finalized. The ledger payments revealed financial pressure. The brass key tied directly to the trunk and the victim's confrontation. The glove and cigarette linked them to the garden on the night of the incident. Just as the police prepared to take the suspect away, Agatha, ever thorough, tested the brass key in the trunk she had located earlier. Inside, neatly folded and carefully labeled, was another name, a possible accomplice who had not yet been accounted for. The revelation expanded the mystery just enough to keep curiosity piqued, hinting that James's tangled affairs might involve more than one villain. Agatha tucked the evidence back into her bag, Hodge brushing at her ankle for approval. She realized the central murder case had been solved, justice was imminent, but a deeper layer remained hidden. The case was not fully closed.
there were still whispers of complicity, secrets lingering beyond the initial confession. Yet, for now, relief, triumph, and a faint hint of amusement suffused the small room, giving Agatha and her companions a moment to breathe before the final restorative chapter.
Chapter 8. Tea, Peace, and James's Return. Sunlight poured through Carsely's net curtains, painting golden stripes across Agatha Raisin's tidy kitchen. The village was awakening with its usual gentle rhythm, distant clatter of milk bottles, a dog barking, and the soft hum of neighbors tending their gardens. Agatha busied herself pouring tea, steam curling from delicate china cups, while Hodge weaved between her ankles, occasionally swatting a stray sugar cube. She held a teacup aloft and with exaggerated flair proclaimed, "To my brilliant detective skills, unmatched in Carsely, if modesty allows me this moment." Friends, Bill, Mrs. Bloxby, and a few villagers still recovering from the hall drama raised their cups in gentle applause, some stifling amused snorts. The scent of freshly buttered toast and lemon drizzle cake filling the room with domestic bliss. As conversation flowed, the door opened with a gentle creak, and to everyone's astonishment, James entered. Slightly disheveled but very much alive, he carried a battered satchel and an apologetic smile. "Well, I see the village has solved my little mystery before I returned," he said, sheepish yet amused. Agatha nearly dropped her cup in shock, though Hodge leapt onto the window-sill, watching with judgmental eyes. James explained his absence. He had staged his disappearance to investigate the blackmail further and gather evidence discreetly, which had spiraled into unintended panic. Relief washed over the room. Gossiping whispers softened into laughter. The romantic tension with Bill found its gentle resolution. A hand lightly brushed Agatha's during the tea-passing ritual. Blushes and half-smiles were exchanged. The jealous rival Sally approached, nodding towards Agatha in truce. "You did well, Raisin. Perhaps even I underestimated your flair." Agatha arched an eyebrow, hiding a smirk, and replied with mock severity, "I accept this apology on the grounds that you bake a cake in my honor next week." Mrs. Bloxby, previously tense and mistrustful, offered a genuine smile, patting Hodge on the head as the cat purred appreciatively. Cozy domesticity settled over the group. Light humor kept the mood buoyant. James recounted hiding in a bookshop, crouched behind shelves of dusty tomes, while Agatha had feared the worst. Hodge, inspired by the commotion, attempted to climb the window ledge and topple the small pot of violets. Agatha muttered, "Truly, even the cat wants a part of my detective glory." Later, she stood on a chair, raising her teacup with the solemnity of a monarch, delivering a short, dramatic speech about justice, courage, and her unmatched observational skills, earning muffled giggles from the group. By late morning, the gathering had settled into calm conversation, gentle teasing, and the quiet satisfaction of a mystery resolved. Yet, as Agatha cleared the last crumbs of lemon drizzle from the table, her eyes caught a small, cream-colored envelope resting on the windowsill. No stamp, no return address, just an elegant handwritten note. She lifted it with curiosity, feeling a tingle of anticipation. Inside, a postcard bore an intriguing sketch of a manor on the outskirts of the village, with a cryptic message, "A new puzzle awaits." Agatha's lips curved in a satisfied smirk, realizing that while this case had concluded, Carsely and its secrets were far from exhausted.
The golden hour bathed Carsely in honeyed light, stretching long shadows across the cobblestones and thatched rooftops. Agatha Raisin wandered slowly through the familiar lanes, letting her fingers brush against the cool iron railings and the soft fringe of grass along the path. The scent of wood smoke drifted from chimneys, mingling with the last calls of a robin settling into the trees. She inhaled deeply, appreciating the quiet rhythm of her village, and for once allowed herself a modest, self-satisfied smile. With exaggerated care, she practiced a humble nod toward passing neighbors, imagining the admiration they might be offering, even if only polite civility. Hodge trotted beside her, tail flicking, clearly pleased with the evening stroll, and Boswell, the little tabby from next door, chased an unfortunate falling leaf with an enthusiasm Agatha found infectious. She stopped at the edge of James's garden, kneeling to place a small bouquet of wildflowers where the rose bushes had thrived.
The memory of the murdered stranger softened in her mind as she touched the delicate petals, thinking of James, of the town, and the fragile thread connecting them all. Flashbacks surfaced gently, the muddy footprints behind the hedge, the torn glove, the brass key, the ledger, all woven into the tapestry of recent events. She allowed herself a quiet laugh as she recalled Hodge pawing through parcels and nearly toppling the teacups in the kitchen, a comfort in chaos. Jealousy, once prickling, had settled like dust in a sunbeam, leaving Agatha free to consider love, solitude, and the occasional thrill of her detective work. The village resumed its calm routine around her. Mrs. Blocksby tended her roses, whispering to them as if to confess secrets long since resolved. Bill strolled past with an easy smile, tipping his hat at Agatha, who returned the gesture with a mock-serious nod. A dog barked nearby, startling a pigeon and unfortunately letting slip an audible fart, which caused Agatha to stifle a giggle while mentally chiding herself for taking life so seriously. She wandered past the Falcon pub, catching the last glow in its windows, smelling the lingering ale and toast from earlier gatherings, and felt a gentle satisfaction at the rhythm of village life. She imagined herself retiring, sitting in a garden chair with Hodge on her lap, cataloguing cases in her mind, though, of course, she would never truly retire. As the sun dipped lower, casting the horizon in shades of apricot and rose, a figure paused in the distance at the corner of a quiet lane. Not threatening, but curious, the figure lingered just long enough to draw Agatha's attention. By the time she glanced again, the stranger had slipped away. A small folded item, a scrap of paper perhaps, lay unnoticed at her feet. She tucked it into her coat pocket, curiosity piqued but unperturbed. There was always another story waiting somewhere, and Carsely had a way of keeping secrets that could only be uncovered by patient observation, luck, or a particularly nosy neighbor. Agatha raised her gaze to the glowing sky, letting the warmth of fading sunlight settle over her shoulders, and whispered to herself, "Well, Hodge, it seems there's always tomorrow for more adventures."